We are here in Vienna at the Belvedere 21. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues here at the Belvedere, but also out there on Zoom. It's today the final day of a one-week-long conference. I hope you have attended our sessions every evening starting at 5 p.m. Here Middle Eastern time. And it is my pleasure to welcome our panelists here. I just do a quick round. We have Andrew Ellis here from Art UK London, then Hannah Thompson from Royal Holloway, University of London, Susanne Kurz, University of Cologne, and Lukas Pilka from Prague, Academy of Fine Arts in Prague. We will try to touch on some of the issues that came up throughout the week over those 20 papers that we have heard and a keynote by Professor Julian Niederrümelin. And to start our discussion, I actually want to ask the panelists just to introduce themselves very briefly and tell us what they are working on, what they are concerned with, and perhaps make a brief statement of what the challenges they see for the art museum in a digital age. So may I start with you, Andy, with a short introduction?
Christian, thank you. So I'm Andy Ellis. I'm Chief Executive of Art UK. Art UK is an art education charity and the online home for every public collection of art in the United Kingdom. We bring together on one platform close to 3,500 public collections of art. Our mission is very much to democratize access to this extraordinary art collection that's owned by the British public and share that with a global audience, which now is over 5 million people. Art UK is a platform that's rich in story content and learning resources, public engagement opportunities, and opportunities for collections to generate income for themselves. So important at the moment when there are so many financial challenges for museums across the United Kingdom. Historically, the majority of the artworks that have come onto Art UK have been through digitization programs, so photographing all the oil paintings, photographing and recording all the sculptures. But in the future, a major partnership with the University of Leicester and Collections Trust through an initiative called the Museum Data Service is going to change the way in which we bring artworks onto Art UK and share them with that audience. The Museum Data Service, launched last September in London, is going to, over the next 10 years, unite all museum object records in raw data form, no images, just in raw data form across all museums, possibly 100 million objects. And for Art UK, this will transform the way in which we can add artwork records to Art UK. We'll be able to, over the next year, having taken 20 years to bring 300,000 objects onto Art UK, by the end of this year, we'll have taken that to 1 million records through the Museum Data Service. So in terms of opening up this extraordinary public collection to the world, it will be a radical step forward. In terms of my interests and my challenges at the moment, there are 4 I would mention here. The first is how you bring together on the same platform a general public audience, which is our main audience at the moment, as well as a university audience of researchers, and how you marry those in a mutually supportive way that creates a sort of flourishing ecosystem between them, and they all benefit from that. So that's one challenge as we think about moving Art UK forward in the future. Second area of interest is how you give the audience, the general public, And in this case, the UK audience, the agency over this extraordinary collection that they own, and make them really feel as though they're stakeholders and owners of this public collection. The third area of interest to us is how you encourage more people to go from the digital to the real world and see the art. We all know, everyone else sitting in this room knows that there's a big difference between seeing the art for real and seeing it online. So how do you encourage people, having seen it online, to go and see the real thing? And finally, as you can imagine, in a world in which financial resources are short and public funding is short, and we don't receive any regular public funding as an organization, we're obviously very interested in the business models to ensure financial sustainability of bringing a national collection together and sharing it in the way I've described.
Hello, my name is Hannah Thompson. I'm a professor of French and Critical Disability Studies at Royal Holloway, University of London. I describe myself as a partially blind academic and activist. I'm interested in critical disability studies and its relationship with the cultural heritage sector. And by that, I mean what we know about disability through people's lived experience and learnt experience. What can this knowledge tell us about how we can change how museums work for everyone if we put disability inclusion at the heart of what museums do, rather than having it as an afterthought if time and money allow. I'm particularly interested in what I call blindness gain, so blindness as an advantage or a benefit. In other words, what happens when we appreciate the particular creativities, strengths and accoutrements of blindness, such as audio description, audiobooks, and we put these kind of offerings at the center of museum practice and experience. At the moment, I'm leading a research project in the UK called the Sensational Museum. It's not an actual museum yet. It's a project where we're trying to we're working with sector experts and pilot museums and user groups to rethink the hierarchy of the senses in the museum space. So as Andy has just intimated, vision is still very much the most important sense in museums and galleries, and particularly in what we call the visual arts. But what if we started thinking about the blindness arts, or in other words, the non-visual elements of museum collections, and how these can be appreciated by everyone, every museum visitor and museum professional, and what that new appreciation and that new sensory logic would bring to the museum experience. So in the Sensational Museum, we say that we want to create a museum in which no one sense is necessary or sufficient. So in other words, any visitor could experience or choose to experience a museum using whichever combination of senses worked for them on that particular visit. And we would suggest that this is done through choice and through optionality, where there is always more than one way of accessing any given content.
So, Christian, thank you very much for the invitation and this fantastic conference here. My name is Susanne Kurz, and I'm a researcher at the Institute for Digital Humanities at the University of Cologne. So, I'm a digital humanist, and my interests are in trust in digital space in the context of a digital cultural heritage objects. And what does that mean? For me, it means the analysis and the modeling of trust mechanisms in digital environments. And also some kind of integration into technical systems. For me, it's so important that we realize that we have new challenges regarding trust in an AI-driven society. And what I'm worried about is the trust in research, or more the reliability of the digital objects, what we are using for our research. And let me explain why it is like this. I think we have forgeries as long as we have original objects. Of course, analog objects at first and digital afterwards. But these forgeries are always in a limited number because significant skills are needed and a lot of effort to produce good falsification, good forgeries. And even if they are good, there are signs of this falsification, and these signs are detectable. So this refers to analog as well as to digital falsification. And we have methods for that. We have experts to detect this falsification, and of course we have a lot of digital forensic methods to identify forgeries. But this situation changed in November 2022. It changed fundamentally because now we have AI methods, and these AI methods are implemented in software systems which are easy to use for a general public, and so they can generate digital objects. And for me, that's fine. It's good that we have this technology, and yeah, we must handle this new situation. Because what's going on now? We have digital objects which are generated by an AI with a content which is only existing in my mind. So is this a forgery, or is it an alternative original? I think it's not a forgery in the traditional sense. But what is really the problem for me is that we cannot distinguish between these AI-generated objects or a properly transformed object from analog to digital, or a born digital data object. We don't know. There's no way to recognize them. So what I think what is really needed is a discussion about original and forgery. This is really important, and we need to identify what is a forgery. We have a digital object and we modify this digital object for reasons. Is that a forgery? I'm not sure. So this is the new challenge we have, and luckily, there is a great deal of trust in cultural heritage institutions. And both researchers and the general public trust in the objects that are disseminated of cultural heritage bodies. And this is really a good point. But I think the trust in museum is in the future not guaranteed. So in the moment, nobody checked the falsification of an object. We trust in the museum, we trust in the library, we trust in the institution. But how should that look like in the future? I think a museum have to justify the basic trust. This is my point. And the reliability must be guaranteed to maintain this trust in an age of generative AI. So from my point of view, what's needed is some kind of labeling, some kind of seal for trusted objects, and we need more transparency. The use of digital signatures is a simple way to prove that a file is unchanged. And we know that there was not any modification of data if we have these digital signature. And we need more of these digital data security mechanisms within cultural heritage bodies. Second, I think it's really important that we label proper transformed digital objects or properly digital objects in all, because what we need is to show the trustworthiness of an object. It's a good idea to label these AI-generated objects. A lot of the tech companies are doing that now. But how to rate a not labeled object? Well, how can we say if this is trustworthy or not? So I think it's really important that we have a new seal, a new label, something like this, that shows this object is trustworthy. And in addition, what we need is transparency. Much more transparency of the object creation and of the object modification. So we need some suggestion for metadata that shows us the provenance and the changing of the data and the authenticity and the provenance and so on. So if we have these data, we can produce an array of change or array of modification of these data. And this is one of the very important trust signals we need, because all these things are only trust signals. And we can use these trust signals to identify these objects I would like to work with. And so the researchers and the public, of course, have a possibility to decide if they trust or not. And what I would like to do is to proceed and to weight all these trust signals within a trust level engine. And with this trust level engine, I can calculate and produce an output of the trust level of a digital object. And this would give users a good basis for the deciding whether or not to trust an object. So maybe some kind of label of a rating system. If you have only one Hakeshant, then maybe it's not so trustworthy. But if we have 4, then it's much better. And in addition, we need the complete information about creating and modification of the object. And what we should never forget...
Anna, you have to leave us something for the discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, one more sentence.
Yeah, okay.
What we should never forget is that trust only arises in people. And trust is always a decision. And a decision is made by the user of the digital object. So thank you very much.
Hello? Yeah, it works. Hi, I'm Lukas, and I'm a software designer. Basically, I have a background in the art history and in the digital design and in the software engineering as well, so I'm quite an interdisciplinary person. But I think that I can introduce my experiences in the best way if I will shortly introduce a few of my current or recent projects. And the first one was my PhD, which I received 2 years ago at the Academy of Arts and Design and Architecture in Prague. That's the other school that you mentioned. It's a similar like an Angewandte and Academy here in Vienna, so there's quite a difference and even the rivalry between the schools. So and back to the PhD. So in this work, I worked with a computer vision, and I tried to create or train the domain-specific computer vision algorithms, which was able to recognize some iconographical symbols or motifs or genres in the pre-modern Central European art. In this case, I worked with a database around the 200,000 artworks, which I collected from the 19 different museums from Czech Republic, not surprisingly, Slovakia, Germany, especially Bavaria and Saxony, and here from Austria, and even here from the Belvedere, thanks to the Christian's effort with the open access data. And you can try the part of my dissertation by yourself if you will visit the website digitalcurator.art, and you can try this visual search engine. So, the second current project is the national aggregator of the museum collections data in the Czech Republic, which I'm working together with the National Museum in Prague. And in this case or in this project, I would like to consider it in the two ways, not just in the technological perspective, but also in the perspective of a collaboration with the other museums, like regional or city museums, because we really focus to support our museum partners and encourage them to foster cooperation and enrich data and share data and to make the cultural heritage accessible. So finally, the third project called Cabinet of Wonders, and it's basically the fine-tuned GPT model, which I'm working together with my colleagues, the machine learning engineers and specialists, and we are trying to create the specialized GPT model, which is culture or museum specific. So that means that we want to make the model which is not capable only to answer the general question like ChatGPT or something similar to us, but is also able to answer the topic-specific questions about the specific museum collections or the specific exhibitions. So that's our primary goal. And the challenges which are in front of us, I really agree with Susanne, and the issue of the data and the trust of the data, I really feel as the strong issue. And also one of the challenges which is also related to the data is to involving the data into the generative models. Because if we use the GPT, we use the general knowledge collected from the many different sources around the world. So, and there's still the question what data was involved and who is talking on the other side. So, and I think that this really important task in front of us is to create a culture-specific or domain-specific models, which we can see what data is behind and what institution or culture it represents.
Yeah, thank you. What I noticed to a certain extent, perhaps not so much with Lukas right now, is that we tend to talk much more about values these days than technology. And yesterday, Florian Winczek said in his talk, let technology disappear or make it invisible. I think that's a little bit a trend, because we have done this conference for 7 years now, and I'm just trying to figure out what really changes over time. And I think now, today, or during the conference, there was much more talk about values. So here we had democratization, we had inclusion, we have trust, we have provenance, also perhaps to a certain thing, an ethical dimension. Yeah, obviously we framed the call in a way that we targeted papers that deal with ethical and societal questions. But nevertheless, I think it was very present in almost all talks and discussions. Somebody even talked about the ethical turn in the museum. I don't know whether we want to adopt that. But let me ask you, Andy, you also said you want to give audience ownership and agency. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that we in the UK, you in Austria, have public collections that are owned by the public. And so what we're trying to do is to give the public the sense of ownership over that, so that they know that art is there for them. It's in their local collections. It's not just in the National Gallery. It's in collections local to them, in Bolton, in Aberdeen, in Cardiff, that they can go and see, that they own. And we try and do that digitally by giving them the ability to contribute knowledge. So, for example, tagging artworks, building their own curations of artworks where they share their views with their friends. We have another project which we've paused for the moment, which is due to financial reasons, but called Art Detective, where so many collections across the UK, there are mysteries around the artworks. There's unfinished data sets. We don't know who the sitter is in the painting, or we don't know the place, or in many cases, we don't know the artist. And so looking to the general public for help with this, and obviously to specialists as well, has led to enormous improvements in our understanding of that collection. And I think the general public being able to say, actually, I know who that is. That's my great-grandfather. He was mayor of Huddersfield, or gives people that real added sense that they can contribute and to own.
And is then the open clam or open access movement also part of this, bringing citizen science in, making them do something with heritage information, activating the public?
I think, going forward, we would like to play a much bigger role leading the collections to open access, particularly around their images. To date, our approach has been much more an approach, and to be frank, the demands from our existing audience for reuse have not been as great as we would have expected. Our approach has been very much around the storytelling, the curating of the UK National Collection to make it more accessible. But going forward, yes, definitely, we very much want to support that.
And Hannah, would you want to elaborate a little bit on the sensational museum, what it really does also to the general audience, because you make the point that inclusion is, or barrier, to make barrier-free access is very much an afterthought usually. You have everything in place and then, we also have to take care of this group of people. But what does it do? How can I imagine this sensational museum? And language-wise, why it is called sensational? It sounds for me like sensationalist. Why is it not called sensory museum or multisensory museum?
That's a good question, actually. In fact, we were the research project took a very long time to develop, and we moved around between various titles. I think we were a little bit worried about calling it multisensory, because when we asked museums what they understood by multisensory, most museums came back to us and said, for us, multisensory is, you know, we have our visual, our visual display, and then we add some stuff around the edges that you can hear, or you can touch, or maybe you can even smell, and that makes the museum multisensory. And whilst that's true, in the sense that it brings into play various senses, it doesn't make the collection necessarily more accessible, because it still relies on the fact that the visitor is primarily understanding the content via the visual. And so sensational, it's kind of, you know, in English it's sensational, sensory shares the same root, but we also wanted to really do something quite shocking, and something which was sensational, as in it would kind of make people stop and think and kind of, yeah, surprise visitors, but also surprise museum professionals. And also in English, we use sensational kind of as a very positive adjective. Oh, I had a sensational time at the cinema, means I had an amazing experience. Not necessarily multisensory, but a really brilliant experience. So it's a kind of a bit of a play on words. And we're trying to really get visitors and museum professionals to really, we're really trying to challenge the embedded oculocentricity of the museum, which always puts the sight at the top of the hierarchy of the senses. And we're trying to do that by showing how equivalent interpretations, which are focused on different senses, are equally, if not more, engaging and memorable for audiences. So I'll give you the example of audio description, because I'm a huge fan of audio description, and I'm a user of it, but also a writer of it. When it's done creatively and in a way which is kind of in tune with the feel and the style of the artwork, audio description can be an aesthetic experience in its own right. So it gives the beholder an experience which is just as aesthetically powerful, just as emotionally moving, just as memorable as the fact of standing in front and viewing the picture. Perhaps it's even more memorable and moving and emotional because it takes longer, because the language that you use to describe something can in itself engage or trigger lots of different senses. So you can use language to evoke sound and smell and touch and the materiality of the image. So in a way, audio description or any museum interpretation, any interpretation becomes a kind of translation, but a kind of creative, engaging translation. And as Susanne was speaking, actually, it occurred to me that this might be obvious to everyone, but I hadn't really made the connection that the images of works of art that we see on the Art UK website, or that Lukas has got in his projects, or that Susanne has been talking about, they are also translations of an original. They're a translation, from the analog to the digital, involving pixels and code and all kinds of computer science that I don't understand. But we forget that when we look at them on these databases. And my argument would be that other ways of engaging with art are just have the same value as a digital image. They're just a digital audio or whatever it is, or a description or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also going to Susanne again, because I'm also very much thinking about this idea. How does the museum compete with in a much bigger landscape of cultural producers now, and how does it remain a trusted source of information? And I always have in my mind the discussions that there were for the image that the museum should somehow share their highest quality images, because there's so much bad stuff on the web anyway, and if people reuse, say, Vermeer's Milkmaid, they should use it in the proper color that the Rijksmuseum distributes. So there was a debate about museum providing trusted images as opposed to bad quality stuff on the web anyway, because the material is there. It's not that it's not there if the museum doesn't publish it. Now we come to perhaps also to textual data, and we are in a hyper-connected world, and we don't need to do everything by our own, I think. We fragment more and more the information that we distribute. We bring in data sets from outside, and here we create a certain mess, I guess, if we don't develop what you said, signals of trust, trustworthy information. And also, we have to kind of deal with the issue of data provenance. But my question is, are there examples or concrete ideas of how we could tackle that technologically? And also, I wonder whether we have to stay within our domain, because provenance plays such a huge role in our lives these days, because of the supply chains that we have. We want to know where our fruit is coming from, who was the producer, who brought this to us, how can I actually have transparency about this process, how can I go back to the origin. Are there examples that we can already build something on, or yeah?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a big task, you are right. It's really a big task. What is a provenance data? There are 1,000 different answers to this question. And so it's not easy to put provenance data to a digital object, because it depends on the kind of the digital object what provenance data means. So I can tell about one open metadata standard. They try to put metadata about provenance and authenticity into digital objects, especially into images. It's the C2PA metadata standard. And this C2PA metadata standard is open, but also driven by Adobe. And they put a seal into their pictures and into their AI content. And with this seal, you can see there are some of these provenance data and authenticity data available. And then you can click on this data, on this seal, and then you will see who produced it with the data of the camera. Yes, the SIF data, then you can see this. And in addition, you can open it in a special kind of app into a browser, and then you can find the array of changes and modification and creation. So they try to do that, but it's in the very beginning, and it's only in a few of the digital objects. You cannot find it very often in the internet. And I think we must bring this open standard, which is used by Adobe, to the cultural heritage bodies. And we must bring more metadata and more trust signals to this standard, and then we can use it within the cultural heritage.
Mm-hmm, thank you. Yeah, you, Lukas, may want to
can I have a short supplement to this issue? Until recently, when we worked with the museum collection, for example, there was we considered that every data in the museum system and in the museum collection, every descriptions and annotation and labeling was created by the museum staff, by the curators, experts, art historians, and so on. Now, there are many projects which are focused on enriching, correcting, supplementing these museum data. For example, Europeana runs one of these projects. And right now, we are in the situation that more and more this information, even in the museum data, will be created automatically. And that also raises some concerns about the validity of data and the correctness of the data. And is it fine if we will mistakes in these automatically generated labels? Is it right if we will achieve the 98% or 99% correctness? Because that's wonderful. Which curator can be approved that his work is 99% correct in all of these facts? But we have different thinking if we evaluate the work of the human creators, and a different approach if we evaluate the work of the machines. So that's also the questions which I'm interested in.
Yeah, anyone who wants to add, because we had also the discussion what is even objective information on a museum's website or in a museum's database. But let me bring in one other concept that was mentioned a lot during the conference papers, and it's this question of the so-called dopamine culture, that our consumption habits have actually changed so much because of social media and big tech companies working on tools that give you instant gratification or very strong stimuli very fast. Do we need to compete with them in a certain sense as museums, or can we just go into a different direction? Is not quite clear to me. The other day somebody said to me, and I don't know whether it's valid, the Rijksmuseum again has relaunched their collection online. They were always in certain sense forerunners in online collections, but they have a new design now, also including some AI features and virtual exhibitions. But to me, interestingly, the images are very big. There's almost no text anymore visible, and somebody said to me, it looks precisely like Instagram. I cannot confirm that because I'm not doing much on Instagram, but are these the models that we have to adapt to because consumption habits have changed?
I suppose it depends what the mission of the museum is, right? So do we want to show people the images, or do we want to get people, as Andy said, they see the digital and that makes them go and see the analog? Museums are a money-making exercise, probably, unfortunately, yes, in some senses, just because of the way that the funding structures are organized. But at the same time, are we not also trying to provide people with a much slower, non-digital kind of, meditative escape from the dopamine culture, And I would argue that something like creative audio description is a way of doing that. If I was in a gallery or on a digital website and I asked one of you to describe a picture to me, it would probably take you about 15 minutes to give me a reasonably decent description, and I would be asking you questions, and together we'd kind of construct something, and that would be a much more memorable and meaningful experience than kind of rushing around a museum trying to collect, making sure we've seen all the big hitters, in the 2 hours that we've allocated ourselves. So I guess the question is not really a question for us, it's more a question for the museum sector.
Do you want to add anything?
I think in many ways, seeing how audiences are attracted in the way you've described, museums, and many museums do this brilliantly already, use their social media accounts to grab attention. And the success there is in where they take the audience from there in terms of further exploration, perhaps on social media, absolutely, or to the website, or then into the museum itself. And I think many museums do this very well, and we can learn from them. I think, though, the other side of this, which Hannah has touched on, is the slowing down side, the taking in what you're looking at. You know, we live in an image-saturated world. We're inundated with images. Billions are produced each year digitally. And one thing we're trying to do there is to help one of our very big learning initiatives, which is called the Superpower of Looking, is about helping children, primary school children, up to the age of 11, give them that critical superpower, that life skill of being able to really see properly, look properly at what they're seeing, see whether they're being manipulated by an image or whether there's an inner truth there. And this resource, and I'm so proud of this, we've now reached sort of 8% of UK primary schools, but is giving primary school teachers, and these teachers generally are not specialists in art, they are generalists, they're now being able to spend 40 minutes with a class of 10-year-olds talking about one artwork, just one artwork, nudging questions out of the children and responses to how to look at that artwork. So there are counters to this as well.
And from a design perspective, Lukas?
It depends. Because I think that the museum experience is not isolated just in the museum building. So it doesn't start with the entrance into the entrance hall, but it starts somewhere at the TikTok, for example, or at the Google Maps, where I'm thinking what to visit in Vienna. And at that time, I'm exploring and I try to get some inspiration, what to visit, and from that outside world, I bring into the museum some presumptions and some feelings and ideas what I will do into the museums. So, and I think that's quite tricky to keep the balance between the communication on the social medias and designing the expectation on the TikTok and on the Instagram, and then creating the relaxing experience in the gallery. So I feel a huge disbalance there.
I would conclude this one-week conference now. We have the option to continue the discussion outside, and you can talk individually also to our panelists. So thanks again to everybody who joined online, who came here to the Belvedere tonight, and specifically to our panelists for their insights. Thank you so much. Also thank you again for all my colleagues who are behind the scenes for, again, making it throughout the week without major technical failures or anything. So wonderful. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.